Okay, grid. Yeah, I already repeated that. Grid. Okay. Except that, anything else? Inline, block, grid, flex. What are the other things that you came across? Come on, guys. You already. I think most of you guys have answered 30 questions, so you should have known the answer by now. Is it only like two of you guys have did the whole application, like the Java HTML CSS challenge, or none of you have attended it? What are the other display values that you have provided? Hidden. Okay, that's a good one. Visible. Visible. Okay, display flex. Okay, flex visible. Okay. Okay, visible none. Okay. So right now, yeah, that's a good amount of answers. Thank you. So right now we'll be just going over a few of the things that you guys already told right now. So I'll be let it be there. It's fine. So display right now, since I am taking display, okay. Block is default as we can see because since H1 is on online, okay, online flex none hidden val visible. Okay, thank you, Lukin. So as you can see, H1 is a by default it's a block level element. Hence there will be display block. So if we change it to any like other stuff, for example, if I make it inline or anything like that, then you could see that the changes that is taking place. So when I make it inline, it will be uh, having the property of inline. So when I if I make it anything like other stuff like flex and grid, so these are the two another display box that you should be aware of. And what does flex do is whenever you use a flex, it divides the whole columns into 12 grids, and you're going to use it but four columns, and you're going to use it. When you use a grid, it will be assuming whenever you're using styling with using of a grid, it will be in the form of table and columns, sorry, rows and columns, my bad. So we'll be just going over that like with a small example. So, guys, one more thing. If you guys are following along with me, and if you're also coding with me, I want you guys to download Node.js with me if you're following along, just to learn how JavaScript works and stuff like that. So this is the website. So here you're supposed to go and download the node. So do that. If you guys are having problem installing Node, just let me know. I'll help you out with that. But make sure as the classes are going on, because for the next half part, I'll be explaining JavaScript, and for JavaScript, you would need Node. So make sure you have it. Node.js. So you have to install that. And where was it? Okay. So we'll be discussing these things. So right now we'll be just going over display grid. I'll just explain you guys with that. Two, three, four, something, seven, eight. So meantime, as I'm typing the code, make sure you are installing Node.js because it would be very necessary when I'm teaching, so you guys can also follow along and complete it with me. Okay. So as you guys can see over here, I've provided two columns. So according to this, it will be working. So the grid has two equal width columns. So as I provide one FR and one FR for each, they'll be having equal width columns. Okay, and FR represent factored value. Okay, so as you can see, this is how the grid column works. So basically, so whenever am I audible, guys? Was I audible? Did you hear my voice? Like, am I audible? Okay. Sorry, something was happening. Okay. Coming back to the lesson. So as we can see over here, I'll just move this to a side and I'll hover over this so you guys can see it. So as you can see over here, whenever move back onto the grid, you can see that my grid is divided into table section, and whenever you can see those, as you know in general, the one that is vertical they are called columns, and the one that are horizontal they are called rows, and the purple line that you're seeing in between, those are called as grid lines. Okay, and so whenever you see this, how basically a grid would be split, and so usually the structure of grid would go in such the like this way. So this grid wherever we created a class, this would be the parent container, and whatever comes in in inside this division would be called as child. Okay, child elements. So these are they could be for a grid. There could be multiple children, as you can see over here, and 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 few of the things that we'll be going over is we saw that there's two things, and the most used properties. Let me. Okay. My system has slowed down because there's so much operations going on. So there's the common stuff that you use in a grid would be row gap. Just providing this so you could understand it better. And whenever I provide this row gap, okay, you could see that there's between rows there's a quite amount of lag. Then the other one would be column gap. Column gap. I'm going to provide that 50 pixels so you guys are getting the video. Refresh over here. So you can see that the gap was provided, and as you can see over here, the row gap has increased, even the column gap has increased to 50 px. So these are the two things that you would be using, and next one would be gap. That is as you can see over here, I provided that. So it would be first that you'll be using gap, which applies for both. You can apply row column and even the column up here. So the format would be first you'll be providing for row, then you will be providing for. So this is one of the the concept that you need to know, and then you saw the grid lines. So you could also specify when the grid should start and how it should work, and that could be done with using yeah, grid column start. There you go. So by this you could say where the column has to start and where the column has to end. Like you can see over here, we can see where the column started and where the column has ended. Then I could do the same thing with column end. Okay, so and this property even applies for rows. You could specify which row you can want to apply and which column you want to apply, and these are the grid template columns is just to provide like how you want to divide your factor value and how you want to provide the spacing. With the gaps you can also use this template. So basically grid will be divided into rows and columns. You can specify if you have more columns, or depending on that you could provide these values. Okay, then we'll be going over flex right now, flex layout. Just so you could understand what the properties are exactly applying, I'm going to provide a few more properties so you could understand there what's going on. Background color. So as you can see over here, so this is what happened when I applied Flexbox, and as you can see over here, it has been divided into columns. So whatever you apply, whenever you provide, so there's few of the properties that you can provide. You can provide justify content space between and the space around. So you can see when I provide space around, there'll be other values. So you can see in space between and the start and these are the justified content. Like wherever you want to keep your content, based on that you could provide these values, and I'll show you what are the difference. So okay. Okay, so these are the values that I was telling you earlier. So justify start, justify center, space between, space around, and space evenly. Okay, these are the primary values that we use. And as you can see, what happens whenever I change the value over here, we can see what space between and space around is. Space between is providing the big gap, and it is also providing the padding around. And evenly, we'll distribute it the space whatever you have provided the container space, it will distribute it evenly. So you guys you came across right now we came across grid and flexbox. So what do you guys think was the primary difference between flexbox and grid? So right now we there was a main thing that we also observed over here when I got the output over here. So there's one primary difference that we came across between flexbox and hidden. Sorry, flexbox and grid. What are the primary difference between when do we use flex and when do you use grid? Do you guys have idea about that? Look, you use visible and hidden. Those properties were quite easy. So use when you use hidden, you can't see it. When you use visible, the blog, the display, whatever the content is visible. So when I use flex and grid, what are the primary differences? Why do we use flex and why do you use grid? Do you guys know the answer, or you want me to explain? You don't know the answer. You guys should say something. Now. What's the difference between flexbox and grid? Flex and grid. Or you guys are not able to understand what I'm trying to teach? Or am I going too fast? Flexbox come row by row, okay, and grid comes with both row and column. Yeah, Likit, that's the right answer. Anyone else wants to add on? No one else know that answer, or is it only the kids who knows this answer? Flex can adjust the number of items by itself. Okay. Okay, I think since there's low number of answers, I assume that you guys don't know, so I'll just teach it. So what's the primary difference between, as Likit said, the primary difference between a flex when you provide display flex and display grid would be, as you can see over here, the flex is applied only to a row. Like you can only apply it to horizontally, and you can't apply it both vertically and horizontally. Whereas when you use grid, you can apply it horizontally and vertically. That's the primary difference. And whenever you provide a grid, it will adapt to the column size. So wherever the screen is provided, according to that it will adapt. Whereas flex will be working depending on the container or depending on the device, and it will be adjusting with that in a row wise manner. So that's the one of the difference between flex and grid. And these are the two most used style css for those are the two display things that you use it most probably. And moving on, we'll be moving on to this thing, gradients and transition transforms. So do you guys have more questions about grids and flexbox? Do you want me to review it? Shall I go over them, or you guys can I move on, or shall I repeat once again? Can I move on to next topic, so you want me to revise anything? Okay. So we'll be moving on to the next few things that are quite important. So, so the next topic that we'll be going over is 2D transforms and transitions. Okay, and so the main properties that we be using in transform methods are such as like translate, rotate, scaling, and skewing and matrix. So these are the four properties that comes with transforms. So transforms would be applied in this way. Okay, I'll just take an example over here. Start off with the pen. So this is where I'm applying the transform property. Okay, so in that I've chosen translate. So what does translate do is, so whenever we apply the translate method, it will be moving the element into from its current position to this thing. Okay, so right now I'll just give it hovering. So as you guys can see over here, what happens is the element would be originally placed over here at this position, and whenever I provide like transform, and in that I have provided the value of translate. So translate, what does this method move? It moves the element from its original position to the position that we have provided. So what I'm trying is I'm asking you to move the pixels from 50 pixels down, right. So the division was moved over here, and this could be done. And then another property would be rotating, and for this we'll be providing the property of 20 degrees. We could see that the division was rotated 20 degrees, and there's other methods that you can explore, such as there's even scaling that you can provide. Scaling will move the, so scaling increases or decreases value or the size of the element. Okay, over here I've scaled too much, maybe that's why it's not visible. Let me lower it down a bit. So basically, it will enlarge the division. It will be higher, so it will be whenever you try to zoom in or zoom out, those are the properties that would be there. And for example, you guys can go over other properties that is in transform, such as scale, scale x is there, scale y, scale z is nothing but when it will be the depth of the screen. So you're moving it, so when you do it scale, it will be according to 2D, and the scaling y would be regarding the height of the thing, and scaling z would be the depth. And those are the how, those are the few of them. And you could also go through skewing is nothing but where you're trying to trying to make a rectangle to, well, let me show you skewing works. So when I do skew, I will probably change the color so you guys can understand. So when we're doing skewing, this is what happens. Whenever you do a skew, for example, imagine there's a rectangle and it will be transformed into like a parallelogram. It will be twisted, right? It will be turned 20 degrees. The element will be turned 20 degrees. This is how skewing works. And these are the few transformations that you can perform. And next would be the transitions. Okay, transitions. So how does transition work? Transitions are usually, there's two things that you have to provide. You have to provide where you want to change it, and you also have to provide like a affection, you have to provide some event so that the transform can occur. For example, you guys have heard about hover, right? HOVR. You guys have used that in your thing, sir. Node.js just opens like terminal, right? Yeah, it does open like terminal. Have you guys did you guys come across transition? Have you guys used it? Okay, so what is the how does transition work? Do you guys have idea like how it works, the procedure? Okay, smooth purpose. Okay, opening them 10 pixels into 10 pixels. Ease in, ease out, linear. Yeah. So yeah, you guys are getting the gist of it. So I'll just show you a small example of how transition would be performed. So basically, you will provide all the properties that you want. So right now, I'm gonna say, what can we pick? Okay, so there's I have provided height and width, and I'll just provide a few changes in the width so you guys can see. So I'm gonna say transition. Okay, transition. I'm gonna provide width change. seconds. Like that. I'm gonna go here and I'm gonna do go here. So here we get this 100. So right now, as you can see, if I hover over this thing, okay, let me close this one. See, as you guys can see, when I provided the width and I told it to expand from 100 pixels to 300 pixels. So what happens is whenever you provide any transition, you have to also provide an event related to it. Let it be hover, focus, and all this other stuff. And whenever you provide any kind of transition that you provide, you have to also specify the event. So when do you want this transition to take place? That's what you're trying to do over here. So whenever you provide a, for example, I said the width would be, I'm going to specify what exact property I want to apply this to, and I'm going to provide the time limit, and based on that the operations will be performed. For example, there was 100 px, and I said whenever for 2 seconds let it transition from 100 pixels to 300 pixels. Okay, so what exact property am I referring to? It would be width. Okay, right now I'm just going to go here and I'm going to show you the official documentation of how this is done. Okay, okay, as you can see over here, see, so whenever whatever happens is, like, whenever you provide a transition, you have to make sure that you also provide the property. So for example, they were provided margin right, and they were told, and as you guys said, ease in, ease out, and you can provide the color and whatever the properties you want to provide, you would be providing it. And you also need to provide, like, over here you can see hover to see the transition. So that's what we have done over here. So I had to hover, like, then only these properties would be applied. So whenever you guys get time, so go over these other properties. There is other, like, timing functions and delay and duration properties. So just go over this. I'm just covering the basics of whatever is necessary for the course. Okay, so you can go over these and see how the changes are done, ease in, ease out, and all the stuff. So this is how transition work, and transition can be provided, as you guys said, in different ways. Okay. So basically, you guys said right, ease linear, ease in, ease out, and ease in and out. Cubic, there's something called a cubic Visionaire, and these things will allow you to provide the speed. So for example, when I say ease, it will, like, it will start with the slow start and it will move on to the fast one. So linear would be having the same effect from start to end. So let me guys provide you an example. So probably you'll understand it a little bit better. So I'm just go a few of them, so I'm not boring you guys. So I think W3 schools would have the best example for this. So as I said, linear would have the same thing. Okay, so whenever I start it or end it, it will have the same thing. But when I say ease in, so whenever I have ease in, what will happen is, it will ease in will, it will have a slow start, and when I say it's ease out, it will have a slow ending. So as you can see, whenever I take off my thing, it will have a slow ending. So these are the other properties that you can. So transition timing function will provide you this, this speed. And one of the other things that you would have in transition that you use normally is a transition delay. So this is one more thing that you would provide. So this will provide the delay or how many ever seconds you want. And Okay, so let me just go here. So there'll be a delay, after 1 second the operation will be performed. Just give me a second. My laptop is loading. Cancel. Cancel. So you can see that there was a delay, and if I provide probably a higher delay than you see here. So you can see whenever it has to come back, there will be a delay. Okay, then so one of the things is, and so let me go back. So when we use a width, or we can also provide height. So, 2 seconds. Height probably like 600 pixels. Okay. Okay, I didn't make the change. Let me refresh. So as you guys can see over here, there's a chain transition taking place. Okay. So you can, so whenever you provide width or height, or provide like transform or translate. So for example, let me provide one more property, that is transform, and transform. 2 seconds, and I'll say probably let's say transform, and I want to make what can I do? I'll scale it. Scale it. Probably what can I do? Let me probably just do translate. So maybe you can see that. Translate, then I'll do 50 px. 50 px. So as you can guys can see over here, whenever I hover over this, these changes will be also applied. I think. Okay. So as you can see, it moved. The element moved to the right hand side. Okay. So I'm translating. I'm moving the division to right hand side 50 px. So that is what is happening over here. And as you can see, and transition, you can provide any other CSS property that you want to hover. You want to provide based on the functions that you want, hovering, focusing, or anything like that. Okay. So this is a transitioning and transformation. It's quite basic, and there's other stuff I would ask you to guys to go over through the official website. Just study it and go through it once, and based on the requirement you will come across situations where you have to other use other properties too. So that's I think that's the concept that we'll be covering out right now. And if you want to come across any, you have any other questions regarding CSS, I would like to discuss it, or we'll be moving on to JavaScript. Do you guys have any other questions regarding CSS that you want to discuss? Since you've already completed class, and you have already completed the coding challenge too, if you have any questions regarding that too, you could bring over that, and we'll discuss it. Yeah, sure. I could go over question properties. I'm just coming across an example so I can cover that. Just give me 1 second. About the iframe. Sure. So you guys have questions about iframe and question properties. Okay. Cool. So as we guys know, in CSS there's primarily like few properties, that is static, relative, absolute, fixed, and sticky. So sticky would be by default all the elements in the position sticky. They would have the position according to the normal document flow. For example, like top, right, bottom, left, and properties would, like they wouldn't affect any those properties, top, left, right, and bottom. They wouldn't affect anything to static elements. And so anything that is static, there won't be anything applied to it. For example, let me show you an example of that. So guys, as I'm writing the code, make sure you guys are also following with me. Sir, in excellence, can you allow us to revisit the question after the time duration is finished? Sure. I don't know what you're trying to say, but we'll go with that. Why should that be used? Okay, can I know about that? Okay. Okay. So I'm done with my code. Let me just refresh this. So I think my screen is visible. Are you able to see the difference? Like, are you able to see the fixed, absolute, and statically position? Are you able to see the differences, or shall I provide a little bit more margin to it? Maybe if I provide a little bit more margins, a little bit more, let me provide a probably padding a little bit more. Padding probably 20 px. This probably since okay. So I think it's a bit more visible. Like, let me move this top right to 50 px. Okay. So as you can see over here, so I'll just go by one, so you're not getting confused. So whatever happens whenever you describe any value, by default it would be static. So what happens in static is, like, whatever, like, top, right, bottom, left that you provide, it does not affect the static value. So for example, as you can see over here, whenever I provided the values over here in the static, it is fixed. So whenever you provide any value, it will stay there, and those top, right, bottom, left term won't affect the statically positioned element. And so whatever happens most of the time, these statically positioned element, whatever you given, they will appear normal, as if, like, there was no, like, specific properties were not set to it. So moving on, like, when you have relative, so that's like relative position on the second one. So these elements, it is first placed according to how the normal, like, if you don't provide any like, properties for it, it will be placed according to how the parent container. For example, you can see a container over here that is with the green color. So based on whatever the properties is provided by the green color, the same, it would inherit those properties, and it would be related to that. But, like, when but providing top, right, and bottom left. Okay, as you can see over here, whenever it comes to relative, I provided top and left. So what is happening is, it's taking the parent color and it's moving according to that. It has moved 20 pixels and left 20 pixels according to that. It has moved, like, there's a gap of 20 pixels in the top, and it has moved according to that, relative to its original position. The element will leave a space, will, like, it will have its own space, but it won't, like, it will stay in the original position, but it will, like, as you can see, relative to the parent element. Okay, what happened? Okay. So coming back, then moving on, we'll be going over absolute. So what happens with the position that is absolute is, it is removed, like, it's totally taken out of the normal document flow. It is not inside there, as you can see. uh, so whenever I provided this absolute value, so what happens is, it does not, like, listen to the parent element. It will, whenever it will start acting or behaving as its own, like, element. So what happens is, it will be removed from the normal document flow, and it will be positioned to the, it will be positioned related to the closest ancestor, or whichever the closest ancestor, like, for example, nearest parent element of this would division absolute position would be the division container here. Based on this container, it is being placed. So that is absolute. So if there's, like, for example, for absolute, you have, it's not in division, so we have put this everything in a division. For example, let's say you didn't put the absolute in the division. So what happens is, then the element will be, like, wherever the, HTML document, it will take the HTML document as the parent element, and based on that it will be placed. Okay, then moving on, fixed, these element will be totally removed from the document. It won't listen to the parent division itself. It will be following the screens, like, screens, whatever it is, and it will be removed from the document flow, and it will be positioned according to the browser window. It's not positioned according to the this thing, what the division or the parent container. Rather, it will be placed according to the main difference between the, like, one of the differences that you can observe between absolute and a fixed position would be, absolute will be flowing. It will be removed from the document. Like, it won't listen. It won't be following the document, like, document flow. So for example, it won't be following the division flow. Rather, it will have its own flow, but it will be according to the parent element. It will be, like, position according to the parent element. Whereas fixed positions will be positioned according to the browser window. So whatever the browser window you're taking, according to that, it will be fixed. So, and you can see the, like, you could say somewhere around fixed and absolute have, like, possibly closely packed, like, they have related values, and whereas relative and static, they have, like, a little bit closer common attributes. So whereas you can see statically position will be according to, so let me split it up. So between statically and relative, the main difference would be even when you provide this position as static, the top, right, left, bottom properties that you provide won't be affected. There won't be any effect on static properties. When you take a relative position, it will follow the document flow, and top, right, bottom, left, whatever you provide, it will be affected. And fixed and absolute are quite similar, so they will be removed from the document flow. They won't follow the document flow. And absolute will be behaving according to the parent, whatever the parent element is present. For example, right now, absolute parent element would be the division container that we provided over here. So as you can see, it is inside this division. So based on that, it will be like, behaving. That's why it's over here. And whereas fixed position won't be behaving according to this division, it will be rather, it won't it will be removed from the document flow, but it will be positioned according to the browser window. So this is the primary differences. So Anika, did that clear your question, or is there any properties that you want to go over again? Okay. And can you allow us to revisit the question after the time duration is finished? Likit, if you don't mind, just elaborate on your question. Like, what do you mean? Like, you want to go back and review the answers? Like, you want to see the answers that you provided? What do you want to say? I think right now you have the access, right? You can see. Okay, I think it's locked. Is it locked? You guys are like, is it locked? You can't see the HTML anymore, or what is it? Like, a brief about you. Okay, right now we can't see. Yeah, sir, it is locked. Okay. I can't unlock it, but I'll bring this to notice to our team. So we will see what they decide. It's not on my hands, but since you guys have asked, I'll forward this request saying that you guys want to revisit the, HTML CSS. Okay, yeah, I will ask them once, and if whatever they make decision, then you guys will be provided the access. I don't have the access to it, but I'll forward this to the team. Okay, so. Okay. Okay, so Likith, you asked one more question that was regarding why should we have to use iframe? Why not this thing, division, and why can't we just use the source or whatever it is, right? So the main reason one would be for, so basically what you're trying to do is there's something called as cross domain. So if you're trying to fetch any kind of information from another website, or you're trying to get it from another website, iframe is built for that, so it won't affect any of your other, it will isolate this content bring. Like, you're trying to fetch, for example, you did one of the example where you're trying to embed a YouTube video, right? So when you're it's called embedding. Okay, one of the reason is to embed the external content. That is also one of the reasons. But whenever you try to do this, whenever you try to embed any kind of content that is not inside your website, so what happens is, when you do that, if you provide any external, if you are providing any CSS or any JavaScript, it won't affect it. So it will make sure that, whatever the iframe it is, it will keep it isolated. And one of the other things is cross domain security. You'll come across this more in the future when you get it deeper into web development. So the term is cross domain security. So whenever whenever you load this kind of information from other domains, so it will make sure that your whole website is not getting affected. Only the iframe or wherever you have provided, it will it will keep it different. So why not division use instead is because one of the reasons is for the styling purpose. But whenever you try to load or embedded external content, so to it can't replicate the functionalities. like you know Whenever you want to get the information, so whenever you're trying to fetch that information, you have to again provide JavaScript code, such as hitting the endpoint or getting the information, fetching, posting. You have to, there's other few JavaScript coding that you have to do when you display it in the division. Okay, but iframe you don't have to do that. It is inbuilt. It will take care of, like, hitting the response and getting the video and displaying it to you. That's one of the reasons why you use iframe. Okay, so those are the two reasons why you use. One is for the to embed the external content into your website. What are you using? And second one would be to isolate it and make sure that you don't have to write the JavaScript code again of fetching the video and displaying it. And third one would be to make sure that if something does go wrong with the external content. For example, there was some YouTube video that you put on the link and the YouTube video is no more. So when you do this and you written a JavaScript code for it, and if it is not present over there, then it would affect your website's performance. Hence, it will have a problem. And one more thing is, maybe this might give you a better explanation. Just give me a second. uh, so whenever you go over here, let me expand this. Okay, go right here. Okay, so let me inspect this. Okay, so So there's something called as Lighthouse. Okay, over here there's something called as Lighthouse. Right now I'm just gonna go to desktop. Let me can use audit page. Okay, or HTTPS. Okay, hold on. I can only maybe I'll take what can I do? Let me say keep for weeks. Okay, I'm going to this thing. Okay, so I'll inspect over here. So as you can see, there's something called as Lighthouse over here. Okay, so I'm just gonna keep it for desktop and I'm gonna analyze the page load. Just give it a second. Okay. I want to show you something, but it's taking, I think, forever to go through that. Just give it a second. I don't know why it's taking so much time. Okay. So I think this is taking our time. So let me just tell you. So what happens is when you do this, it will give you a report kind of thing of the website that you have built, and it will. There's something called as accessibility in that. So what this accessibility shows is uh, how your page performances and stuff like that. Maybe it's taking too much time right now. Maybe another time I'll show you this. I don't know why it's taking so much time, but just do it on your go to Lighthouse and click on analyze, and in that you'll be having something called as accessibility. And what happens is if your website is not, can you please explain excellence and explain code without looking at the requirement and also explain how to figure out what the requirements? Okay, sure, Kavi, I'll go with that. So whenever you go through the Lighthouse, and it will give you one of the values it will having is accessibility. So what happens is when you're using divisions and all these things, your websites loading, and whenever you try to when you're embedding other kind of stuff, it will lower the performance of your website. Hence it is it's appreciated to use iframe. Therefore that's why you have to use iframe in rather of like what you said, division and href. Did I answer your question, Likit? Did I address the question properly, or did you have any did my answers meet your questions, what are you expecting? Okay. So coming back to Kavya, you said, "Sir, can you please pick an example from Excellent and explain a code without looking at the requirement, and also explain how to figure out what the requirements are." Okay. So Kavya, you're talking about with respect to JavaScript, right? Because HTML CSS is closed, right? Like you're talking regarding the JavaScript, right? That's coming up. Or different. Okay, different. Okay, thank you. Yeah. So this is a there was a common misconception. Like even I thought they both were the same, but as I got to know, even they are different. But right now they're not. Like even I know that. So Java and JavaScript are totally two different things. They're not correlated. They are programming language. That's the only thing that's common among them. So JavaScript is primarily like right now. Primarily it was used for only like web development and all the stuff. But now JavaScript has expanded due to like the programming is not limited to only web development. It is used in other applications too, such as game development, and it is also used in machine learning and other fields. So the scope for JavaScript has increased quite a lot right now. And so basically what happens is for C plus plus or C, Python, all these languages are divided into interpreter and compiler and all this stuff. So and you guys would have gone through this topic quite a lot. So the language is a compiler, compiled language, or interpreted language. So what do you guys think JavaScript is? Is it an interpreted language or is it a compiled language? Interpreted. Okay. Scripting language. Okay. Any other guys? So there's interpreted. Someone said that scripting. Sir, it is mainly used to link the code. Okay, but that is really right. But what do you think JavaScript is? Is it does it belong to a compiling language or what is it? Dynamic language. Okay, scripting language. Okay, okay. So guys, okay, I understand you're trying to say it's a scripting language. So my question is, what happens? So whenever I run the JavaScript code, you guys know, right? Does it take a block of code, compile it, then run it, or does it go line by line and interpret it? How does it go? Is it compiled or is it interpreted? Like how does the back end of JavaScript run? Okay, line by line execution. Okay, line by line execution. So you guys are saying JavaScript is interpreted. Okay, interpreted. Okay, okay. Okay, so just to give you a brief, so JavaScript is a bit different from what you can say that it is an interpreter or a compiled language. So traditionally, so when in the initial days, JavaScript was taught as an interpreter, but nowadays it's not. In the modern days, JavaScript is no more longer considered few people there's still debates going on regarding that, but it is not you can't say that it is a interpreted language for sure. So what happens is JavaScript has something a little bit weird that is called as JIT. So that is called just-in-time compilation. So what happens over here is as JavaScript advanced, so what it does is it compiles certain part of code into machine and it runs it. So these engines initially interprets the code and optimizes frequently whatever it used frequently it will optimize it, and based on that it will compile it to the machine code. So by this they're making it a little bit faster. So whenever you come across whether in interview or something they ask you whether it's an interpreter or compiled. So in the initial days whenever it came, it was an interpreter, but now it acts as a JIT. So that is just in time compilation. So that's how JavaScript works. And whenever you're trying to run for example, I think you guys wouldn't probably know that. So do you guys know how JavaScript runs and what's the background that's running whenever you try to run it in Chrome? What is the the compiler that runs it? What runs the JavaScript code? Okay, Console, not really console. No, console is where you can see anything that you wanna, like, you wanna interact with your code. Yeah, so not really console. Okay, so basically what happens is, when you're trying to run it in the system, so as I asked you guys, Node would be the person who would be taking the code and turning it to a machine language. But whenever you come to browsers, for example, Chrome, it uses something called as V8 engine. So V8 engine is the person who runs, like, takes the code, runs it and execute it. So that's what happens in JavaScript code. So the JIT concept was also introduced in, the V8 engine also follows this JIT, just-in-time compilation. So what it does is it will take the JavaScript code, compile it and see what are the parts that is used quite a lot. Then based on it, it will optimize it. So you guys, so most of you guys have, if you're following with me, you've installed Node, right? You guys have problem with Node, or have you guys installed it? Okay. Anyone else who is having trouble with installing Node? Okay. So since none of you guys are not saying anything, so I assume that you guys have installed JavaScript successfully, and you guys don't have a problem. So if you have a problem, then you have to let me know so I can solve the queries. If not, then I'll just assume that you have no problems and I'll be moving on with the code. So just share my screen. Right now, I'll just show you a small example of how JavaScript is. Just once again, I'm having trouble sharing my screen. Just give me so moving back. I'm going to give you a small example. So we use JavaScript for simple, like, if you want to add any functionalities to the things that you're given on that, you'd be using this. So right now, I'm just going to show you a small example. Trying to refresh it. Okay. So when you try to do this, right? So what we are trying to do over here is, so with the JavaScript, we try to, if you want to add any function, for example, right now what I did was I did click me so that the like the inner element. So I have provided the passage. I'm taking the message over here, and whatever this is called inner HTML. So I'm trying to change the value of this thing. So a value of the paragraph, whatever the content was in there. So I'm trying to change that. So that's what I'm trying to do over here. So and the variables that you would come across in JavaScript is are like mainly three of them. So they are just var, let, and constant. So these, not length, let, and constant. So these are the three the values that, the types that you would be using. Again, it can be anything. It can be a string, a variable, a number, or a float, or a decimal, anything that you would have. These are the three things that you would be using. And one of the things that you need to know is there's something called as a ECMAScript. So during the version 5, this is a quite common asked question. So the what happens is JavaScript went from version 5 to version 6, and at this time the major changes came, and one of those major changes were var, let, and constant. So earlier days there was only var. So what happens with var is var has global scope, and let and constant have local scope, hence they were introduced. And we'll go further into it, what's the difference between a global scope and local scope, and why let and constant should be used more than var. Okay. And I and how many minutes more? Yes, 8:51. So guys, there's a prompt alert. Okay, the logging and operators in JavaScript type of. Okay, so I don't think so. I can complete all those topics in like next 10 minutes. So we'll just move on to the queries. I think. Yeah. I think. Do you guys have patience? Like, there's like three more topics, so it will take a little bit longer. Shall we continue the class, or shall I end it here? So there's like still prompts and alerts, logging, and there's operators in JavaScript code. Shall I move on, or shall I stop the class here? I don't want to do it halfway and just not do the class.